My daughter told 195 wedding guests that I let her father die. Not directly, but Melissa stood at that podium in her $17,000 dress and said I was a pathetic failure who let Dad die because I was too broke to save him. That David died ashamed of the woman he married. That she was grateful her new husband's family had real money, unlike her disappointing mother. Every word was a lie. I sat at table 14 in the back corner watching her destroy 7 years of my silence. The Whitmores nodded along, their hedge fund friends smirked. Nobody looked at the broken black widow in the discount dress. I took a slow sip of water and set the glass down carefully. Melissa had no idea I had $36 million in my Chase account. She was about to find out why you never humiliate the quiet woman in the corner. Let me tell you how we got here. How my own daughter became someone who could weaponize her father's death for social approval. My name is Joanne Adler, and I am 60 years old. For 18 years, I was a Pentagon contractor specializing in classified cyber defense systems, the kind of work that paid extremely well but required top-secret clearance and complete discretion about your wealth. My husband David and I raised Melissa in a modest 3-bedroom row house in Philadelphia. We drove used cars, shopped at Target, took vacations to the Jersey Shore instead of Europe, not because we could not afford better, but because David believed in teaching our daughter the value of money. Do not spoil Melissa with wealth, he always said. Let her build character first. David was an elementary school teacher, 32 years at the same public school making $48,000 a year. He could have quit after my defense contract started bringing in serious money, but he loved those kids. Said teaching kept him grounded. Melissa never knew we had money. To her, Mom was just some woman who worked on computer stuff for the government. Dad was a teacher. We were middle class, maybe lower middle class when times got tight. Then in 2015, everything changed. David felt a persistent pain in his abdomen during a routine physical. Stage 3, pancreatic cancer. The oncologist said we had maybe 12 months with standard treatment. I was not accepting maybe. I liquidated everything I could touch, sold my shares in 2 defense startups I had helped build, cashed out my Lockheed Martin consulting retainer worth $2.1 million annually, burned through every contact I had in military medicine. We tried experimental immunotherapy at Johns Hopkins, $195,000 per treatment cycle, proton beam radiation at Penn Medicine, $103,000 per session. Clinical trials in Germany that cost $47,000 just for the consultation. Melissa watched me write check after check, saw our savings statements showing massive withdrawals, watched me sell the row house we had lived in for 17 years to pay for treatments insurance would not cover. Mom is spending everything trying to save Dad, she told her friends. She was not wrong. The medical bills totaled $2.3 million over 24 months. Every penny came from our accounts. But here is what Melissa did not see, the money flowing back in. 4 months after David's diagnosis, the Pentagon awarded me the largest single contractor cyber defense project in Department of Defense history, $52 million over 5 years, completely classified. Even my family could not know the details. 7 months later, one of my defense startups went public. My original stake, which I had supposedly sold, was actually converted to shares I could not touch until after the IPO lockup period. When the stock hit the market, those shares were worth $34 million. A year after that, Lockheed Martin bought out another company I had designed security protocols for. My consulting agreement included back-end royalties that triggered when they reached certain revenue milestones. That check was $20 million. By the time David entered hospice care in late 2016, I had more money than we had ever dreamed of, but I could not tell him, could not tell Melissa. The Pentagon contracts required complete financial discretion until the projects concluded in 2019. David died on February 8, 2017. Melissa was 28 years old. At the funeral, she stood up and talked about how Mom had spent everything trying to save Dad, how we lost our house and our savings. But at least Dad knew how much Mom loved him. I let her believe it. For 7 years I let Melissa think we were broke, that her mother was a failure who could not save her husband despite spending everything she had. She got a job in marketing, making $72,000 a year, moved into a studio apartment in Manhattan that cost $3,100 monthly, started dating men from finance who made real money. Meanwhile, I kept living like I was broke. Bought a small condo in Philadelphia for $195,000 cash, but told Melissa I was renting. Drove a 2013 Honda Accord I had owned for years. Shopped at the same Target. But every month, Melissa's student loans mysteriously got smaller. Her credit card payments somehow cleared themselves. When she needed a security deposit for a better apartment, an anonymous cashier's check appeared in her mailbox. She never questioned the coincidences. In 2020, she started dating Christopher Whitmore, hedge fund analyst from a family that made their fortune in steel manufacturing 3 generations ago. They owned a 14-bedroom estate in Gladwine, drove matching Porsches, spent summers in the Hamptons. Melissa was in heaven. Finally, she was dating someone with real class. The Whitmores looked down on me from day one. At family dinners, they made comments about Melissa's working-class background. How fortunate she was to be joining their family. Harrison Whitmore once told me at a Christmas party that he admired how I had done my best with limited resources. I smiled and thanked him for his understanding. But Melissa had no idea what her father really said about her in those final weeks. The conversations we had when morphine made David brutally honest about our daughter's character. She was about to find out why you should never assume the quiet black woman in the corner does not have the nuclear option. The wedding was everything Melissa had dreamed of. The Marion Golf Club in Ardmore, a venue that cost $92,000 just to book for the day. 195 guests, all dressed in designer everything, sipping $300 bottles of champagne. I wore my best dress. A $250 navy blue from Nordstrom rack that I had owned for 4 years. Melissa had specifically asked me not to embarrass her by trying to rent something expensive. The ceremony was beautiful. Melissa looked radiant in that $17,000 Monique L'Huillier gown. Christopher looked like he stepped out of GQ in his custom $5,000 Brioni tuxedo. I walked her down the aisle, gave her away to the man she loved. Smiled when the photographer asked me to look proud of your daughter. I was proud right up until the reception started. The Whitmores had seated me at table 14, the back corner near the kitchen service doors. My table mates were Christopher's elderly great-aunt, who was hard of hearing, and 2 distant cousins who clearly drew the short straw. Melissa's table was front and center, the head table decorated with $800 worth of white peonies. She sat between Christopher and his father Harrison, laughing at their jokes, fitting perfectly into their world. During cocktail hour, I overheard conversations. Christopher's Yale buddies talking about their vacation homes in Nantucket. Hedge fund managers comparing their Bentley collections. Investment bankers complaining about their children's $70,000 annual private school tuitions. One of Christopher's groomsmen asked Melissa how she escaped her circumstances. She laughed and said, "Good genes and better taste, I guess." The real show started when Melissa stood to give her speech. She tapped her champagne flute with a silver spoon. The room went quiet. 195 people turned to look at the beautiful bride. "Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for being here on the most important day of my life." Applause, smiles. The usual wedding opening. You know, growing up, I never thought I would end up somewhere like this, married to an amazing man from such an accomplished family, surrounded by all of you incredible people. More applause. I took a sip of water. I have to be honest with you all. My childhood was not easy. My mother. She paused and looked directly at me. My mother tried her best, but she never really amounted to anything. The room got quieter. A few uncomfortable glances toward table 14. After my father died, she became well. Let us just say grief did not bring out her best qualities. She kind of gave up on life, on success, on trying to provide for her family. I set my water glass down carefully, folded my hands in my lap. I am not proud to say this, but there were times I was embarrassed by her limitations, her working-class background, the way she settled for mediocrity instead of pushing herself to be better. Harrison Whitmore nodded approvingly. Several Whitmore family members exchanged knowing looks. I used to wonder what my father would think if he could see how far she fell after he died, whether he would be ashamed of the woman he married. That is when something cold settled in my chest. Melissa was using David's memory as a weapon against me in front of 195 people, but thankfully I found Christopher, and through him, I found this family. A family that showed me what real success looks like. She raised her glass toward the Whitmore family table. Harrison. Victoria. Thank you for welcoming me into your family. For showing me it is possible to rise above your circumstances. For proving that class is not an accident of birth, but a choice you make every day. Standing ovation from half the room. The Whitmore half. So here is to new beginnings, to leaving the past behind, to finally having a father figure who actually accomplished something with his life. She smiled at Harrison Whitmore, who beamed back at her. And here is to my real mother sitting over there at table 14, who did her best with what she had, even if it was not very much. A few people actually laughed at the pathetic black woman in the discount dress who could not even afford a decent table at her own daughter's wedding. Melissa raised her glass one final time. To everyone who helped me become the woman I am today, and to those who showed me exactly what I did not want to become. She looked straight at me when she said it. The room erupted in applause. Melissa hugged Christopher, kissed her new father-in-law on the cheek, basked in the approval of 195 people who now knew exactly what kind of failure had raised her. I sat there for 45 seconds, listening to the applause die down, watching my daughter glow with pride at having publicly humiliated the woman who raised her. Then I reached into my purse. Melissa had no idea what I was carrying, what I had been saving for 7 years, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth about everything. She was about to learn that some lessons cost more than others. What I pulled from my purse was not a weapon. It was something far more dangerous. David's iPhone. The same space gray iPhone 8 that he had used during his final weeks in hospice. The phone I had kept charged for 7 years. Unable to delete the last voice memo he recorded 4 days before he died. I had listened to it exactly once. The night after his funeral. Then I locked it away. Too painful to hear again until tonight. I excused myself from table 14. Walked past the dessert station. Past the bar where Christopher's groomsmen were ordering $60 shots of Johnny Walker Blue. Past the photo booth where Melissa was posing with her new family. I found a quiet alcove near the coat check room, unlocked David's phone, opened the voice memos app. There it was. Recording dated February 4th, 2017, 4 days before he died. Duration 3 minutes 42 seconds. I pressed play. David's voice, weak but determined, filled my ear through the phone speaker. Joanne, if you are listening to this, it means I am gone, and you are probably thinking about playing the martyr for the rest of your life. Even dying, he knew me too well. I need you to know some things about Melissa. Things I could not say while I was alive because I kept hoping she would grow out of it. I closed my eyes listening to my dead husband's confession. She has become cruel, Joanne. Not just selfish, cruel. Yesterday, when the hospice nurse was bathing me, Melissa asked when I was finally going to die, so you could stop wasting money on treatments that obviously were not working. Those were her exact words. The words hit like ice water. She told me she was embarrassed to bring friends around because of how pathetic you had become. She said she wished she had been born into a different family. A successful family. David's voice got stronger, more urgent. I heard her on the phone with that Whitmore boy, Joanne. She was laughing about how her working-class mother would never fit into their world. She said she was grateful she inherited her intelligence from my side because your genes were clearly limited. I had to pause the recording. My hands were shaking. When I pressed play again, David was crying softly. I am scared, Joanne, not of dying, but of what she is becoming. Promise me you will not enable this behavior with money after I am gone. Promise me you will make her earn her character the hard way. His voice dropped to a whisper. And if she ever dishonors my memory to make herself look better, if she ever uses my death as an excuse to hurt you, then you have my permission to tell her exactly what I thought about the woman she was becoming. The recording ended with a timestamp, February 4th, 2017, 11:38 at night, 4 days before he died. I stood in that alcove for 5 minutes, listening to the wedding reception continue behind me. Melissa's laughter carrying over the music, the Whitmore family holding court at their tables, probably still discussing my daughter's inspirational speech about rising above her circumstances. For 7 years I had honored David's wishes. I let Melissa struggle. Let her think we were broke. Let her build what I thought was character through adversity. Instead, she built resentment. And tonight she crossed the line David specifically warned me about. She dishonored his memory to gain social approval from people who would not have looked at her twice if they knew the truth. I walked back into the reception hall, past the dance floor where Melissa was spinning in her $17,000 dress, past the Whitmore family table, where they were probably planning her integration into their social circle. I sat down at table 14 and opened my phone. Not David's phone. My phone. I opened my Chase Bank app. Current checking account balance $36,147,618. I opened my Vanguard investment app. Portfolio value $45,293,156. I had photos of my military credentials, including the Defense Meritorious Service Medal I received for the Pentagon Cyber Project. I had screenshots of the property deed showing I owned the 14-bedroom Whitmore family estate in Gladwine, had owned it since 2010 when I bought it from their bankruptcy auction for $3.5 million. The Whitmores had been renting it from me for $1 per year under a charitable arrangement I set up to help them save face after their steel fortune collapsed. I had bank records showing every anonymous payment I made toward Melissa's student loans, credit cards, rent, car payments, $268,000 total over 7 years. And I had David's voice recording, time-stamped and saved to the cloud with his explicit permission to reveal the truth if Melissa ever crossed this exact line. The DJ announced the father of the bride had requested to make a speech, except there was no father of the bride. I stood up anyway because some promises to the dead are more important than keeping peace with the living. I did not walk straight to the microphone. That would have been sloppy, emotional, the kind of mistake that lets your target escape with dignity intact. Instead, I went to the bar. "Excuse me," I said to the bartender, "could I borrow your phone charger? I need to make sure my phone does not die during speeches." He handed me a portable battery pack. I plugged in both phones, David's space gray iPhone and my Samsung Galaxy, both fully charged now. While they powered up, I opened my email and forwarded myself a message. Something I received that morning from my attorney, confirming the final details of a decision I had been considering for months. Then I opened my photos and created a new album. Selected 28 images I had never shown anyone, bank statements dating back to 2017, property deeds with my name as sole owner, screenshots of every anonymous payment to Melissa's accounts, military commendation certificates, the Pentagon contractor badge I carried for 18 years. And one more thing. I opened my voice recorder app and started a new recording. just in case anyone later claimed I lost my mind or said things I did not mean. This is Joanne Adler speaking. Today is October 7th, 2024. The time is 9:12 p.m. I am of sound mind and clear judgment. What I am about to do, I do with full knowledge of the consequences, in accordance with my late husband's explicit wishes, and in response to my daughter's public dishonoring of her father's memory. I stopped the recording and saved it with the timestamp. The DJ was introducing the maid of honor for her speech, Melissa's college roommate telling charming stories about girls' trips to Miami and promotion celebrations. I used those 12 minutes to prepare my evidence in the exact order I wanted to present it. First, David's voice recording cued to the most damaging parts. Second, my Chase Bank statement screenshot cropped to show just the account balance and today's date. Third, the property deed showing my ownership of the Whitmore estate with the $1 per year rental agreement attached. Fourth, a spreadsheet I created years ago tracking every dollar I anonymously gave Melissa since David died. Fifth, my military commendations and Pentagon contractor credentials. Sixth, the email I forwarded myself that morning from my estate attorney confirming the changes to my will that would take effect immediately upon my verbal authorization. By the time the maid of honor finished her speech, I had everything arranged, 2 phones fully charged, evidence sorted, voice recording ready to play through the venue's sound system. The DJ called for the mother of the bride. Actually, I heard Melissa's voice over the microphone. My mother is a little shy about public speaking. She probably will not want to say anything. Nervous laughter from the Whitmore tables. Sympathetic nods from people who assumed the broke, pathetic black widow was too intimidated to address such a sophisticated crowd. I stood up. No, Melissa. I think I do have something to say. The room went quiet. 195 people turned to look at the woman in the $250 dress walking toward the microphone. Melissa's face went pale. For just a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to apologize when she broke something valuable. But it was too late for apologies. I reached the podium and looked out at the crowd, at the Whitmore family in their designer clothes, at Melissa in her $17,000 dress, at all the people who just applauded her speech about rising above her pathetic mother's limitations. I connected David's phone to the venue's sound system through the auxiliary cable the DJ provided. Then I began to speak. Good evening, everyone. My voice carried clearly through the room. Every person in that reception hall could hear me. I want to thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate Melissa and Christopher's wedding. It has been educational. A few polite chuckles. Melissa was gripping her champagne flute so hard I thought it might shatter. You know, I have been sitting at table 14 tonight, listening to all the speeches, hearing about success and accomplishment, about rising above your circumstances and joining families with real breeding and class. I paused and looked directly at Harrison Whitmore. It got me thinking about my late husband David, about what he would have thought of tonight's festivities. Melissa's eyes were darting between me and the exit doors. Christopher had his hand on her shoulder, but he looked confused. Like he could not quite figure out why his new mother-in-law suddenly seemed so calm and confident. David was a wonderful man. An elementary school teacher who touched hundreds of young lives during his 32 years in the classroom. He died 7 years ago after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. Sympathetic murmurs from the crowd. Several people nodded respectfully. Now, during David's illness, we spent everything we had trying to save his life. Every penny. Melissa watched me write check after check to doctors and hospitals. She saw our savings disappear. She witnessed what she believed was her mother spending herself into poverty for love. I looked at Melissa again. Her face was white now. And after David died, Melissa believed her mother was broke. Finished. A pathetic failure who gambled everything on treatments that did not work. More nods. People were feeling sorry for me now. The grieving black widow who lost everything. For 7 years, I let her believe that story. I let her think I was struggling financially, living in a small apartment, driving an old car, shopping at discount stores because I had no choice. Harrison Whitmore was listening intently now. This was not going where he expected. I let Melissa believe she was dating above her station when she met Christopher, that she was lucky to be accepted into a family with real money and real class. I held up both phones. But before I continue, I think you should all hear something. A voice recording David made 4 days before he died. Something he asked me to share if certain circumstances ever arose. Melissa stood up abruptly. "Mom, maybe we should sit down, Melissa." My voice had changed, still calm but with an edge that made her freeze. "You just gave a beautiful speech about your father dying ashamed of the woman he married, about how grateful you are to have found a real father figure in Harrison, about leaving the past behind." I held up David's phone. "I think it is only fair that everyone hears what your father actually said about you in his final days." The room was dead silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. This recording is time-stamped February 4th, 2017, 4 days before David Adler died. He made it specifically for this moment. Melissa's mouth was moving, but no sound was coming out. After you hear your father's actual words about the daughter he was leaving behind, I have a few other things to share with you all. Things about success and accomplishment, about class and breeding, about exactly who has been rising above their circumstances. I pressed play on the recording. David's weak but determined voice filled the reception hall through the sound system. "Joanne, if you are listening to this, it means I am gone, and Melissa has probably crossed the line I warned you about." 195 people went completely silent. "She has become cruel, Joanne. Not just selfish, cruel. Yesterday, when the hospice nurse was bathing me, Melissa asked when I was finally going to die so you could stop wasting money on treatments that obviously were not working." Those were her exact words. Gasps from around the room. Melissa's face went from white to green. "She told me she was embarrassed to bring friends around because of how pathetic you had become. She said she wished she had been born into a different family, a successful family." Several wedding guests turned to stare at Melissa. Christopher's grip on her shoulder tightened. David's voice grew stronger on the recording. "I heard her on the phone with that Whitmore boy, Joanne. She was laughing about how her working-class mother would never fit into their world. She said she was grateful she inherited her intelligence from my side because your genes were clearly limited." Harrison Whitmore's face darkened. He was staring at Melissa now, not me. "I am scared, Joanne. Not of dying, but of what she is becoming. Promise me you will not enable this behavior with money after I am gone. Promise me you will make her earn her character the hard way." The recording ended. I looked out at 195 silent faces. "That was your father's dying wish, Melissa. That I not spoil you with money. That I let you build character through struggle." I held up my phone now, showing the screen to the room. "For 7 years I honored that wish. I let you believe we were broke. I watched you work for everything. I hoped you would develop empathy, humility, the qualities your father valued." Melissa tried to speak. "Mom, I am not finished." My voice cut through her attempt like a blade. "Instead, you became exactly what your father feared. Someone who values wealth over character. Someone who would dishonor the dead for social approval." I opened my Chase Bank app and held the phone up high enough for the front tables to see. "So, let me share a few facts with everyone here tonight. Facts about success and accomplishment." I read directly from the screen. "My current checking account balance is $36,147,618. The silence was absolute. No one even breathed. "My investment portfolio managed by Vanguard is worth $45,293,156. Harrison Whitmore was gripping his wine glass so hard his knuckles were white. I pulled out a printed document from my purse. "This is my military service record." I held top-secret clearance for 18 years as a Pentagon contractor specializing in cyber defense systems. The project I completed in 2019 was the largest single contractor award in Department of Defense history, $52 million. Several people at the Whitmore family table were now staring at their plates. But my favorite document is this one. I held up another paper. This is the property deed for the estate at 47 Stone Ridge Lane in Gladwin, Pennsylvania. Some of you might recognize that address. Harrison Whitmore went completely pale. It is the Whitmore family's ancestral home, the 14-bedroom mansion where they have lived for 4 generations, except they do not own it. I looked directly at Harrison. I do. I bought it in 2010 when your steel fortune collapsed and you faced bankruptcy. You have been renting it from me for $1 per year under a charitable arrangement designed to help you save face. Victoria Whitmore made a choking sound. The property is currently valued at $9 million. The taxes which I pay are $68,000 annually. The maintenance which I cover runs about $44,000 per year. I turned back to Melissa. Would you like to know what else I have been paying for? She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. I pulled out my phone again and opened a spreadsheet. Your student loan payments. Anonymous cashier's checks totaling $94,000 over 6 years. Your credit card payments when you max them out, $47,000. Your apartment security deposits and rent assistance, $98,000. Your car payments, insurance, and maintenance for that BMW you drive, $29,000. Total anonymous financial assistance to Melissa Adler over 7 years, $268,000. The numbers hung in the air like accusations. Every month I watched you struggle just enough to think you were earning your way. Every month I made sure you never actually failed. And every month I hoped you developed the character your father wanted you to have. I paused and looked around the room. Instead, you stood at this podium tonight and told 195 people that your father died ashamed of me, that I was a pathetic failure who never amounted to anything. My voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but the microphone carried every word. Your father did not die ashamed of me, Melissa. He died worried about you. Melissa was sobbing openly now. Christopher looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor, but I was not done. I pulled out one final document. This morning I met with my estate attorney. This is a revised will executed and notarized as of 4:30 p.m. today. I held the document up for everyone to see. My previous will left everything to Melissa. My properties, my investments, my military pension, everything. Approximately $81 million. Melissa looked up through her tears, hope flickering in her eyes. My new will leaves Melissa exactly $1, the same amount her in-laws pay in rent. The hope died instantly. The rest goes to the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network in memory of David Adler, a man who valued character over wealth and kindness over class. I folded the will and put it back in my purse. The changes take effect immediately upon my verbal authorization, which I am giving right now in front of all these witnesses. I looked at Melissa one last time. Congratulations on your wedding, sweetheart. You finally got what you always wanted. A family with real money and real class. I gestured toward the Whitmore table, where Harrison was staring at his wine glass like it contained poison. Of course, now that you know who actually owns their house, things might be a little awkward at Thanksgiving. I disconnected David's phone from the sound system and picked up both devices. Enjoy the rest of your reception, everyone. The bar is already paid for. I made it exactly 20 feet from the microphone before the chaos started. Melissa's scream cut through the silence like a knife. Not a sob or a cry, but a full-throated scream of pure anguish that made half the room flinch. You cannot do this. You cannot just destroy my life. She was on her feet now. Her $17,000 dress wrinkled from gripping the fabric. 7 years. 7 years I have been your daughter, and you destroy me in front of everyone. I turned back toward her, my voice calm. 7 years, Melissa. 7 years, you let me believe your father died ashamed of me. I never said that. I pulled out David's phone again. Would you like me to play the recording again? I have the exact timestamp where your father quotes your words about him dying ashamed. Melissa's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. That is when Christopher found his voice. Now wait just a minute. He stood up, his face flushed red with rage or embarrassment, or both. You cannot come to our wedding and humiliate my wife with some fabricated recording. Fabricated? I opened the voice recording app on my phone and showed him the timestamp and file properties. February 4th, 2017, 11:38 p.m. Original iPhone audio file never edited. I can provide the digital signature and metadata to any forensics expert you would like to hire. Christopher's father, Harrison Whitmore, finally stood up. His hands were shaking. The property deed, that has to be forged. Our family has owned that estate since 1928. I pulled out my phone and opened the Pennsylvania Property Records website. Would you like me to show everyone the public records? Property transfers are public information, Harrison. Your bankruptcy filing in 2010 is also public record. Should I pull that up too? His face went from red to gray in seconds. You, he whispered. The words would not come. Actually, my husband was a saint, unlike some people in this room. That is when Victoria Whitmore, Harrison's wife, started crying. Not quiet tears, but body-shaking sobs that drew every eye. 43 years, she wailed. 43 years we have been telling everyone about our family estate, our heritage, our legacy. She looked around at the other society families, most of whom were now staring at their phones, probably Googling the property records to verify my claims. We are ruined, completely ruined. Meanwhile, Melissa had found her second wind. All those anonymous payments. You were spying on me, stalking my finances. I was helping you, Melissa. Every month for 7 years. I did not ask for your help. No, you just cashed the checks. Several wedding guests were now openly taking photos and videos with their phones. I could see at least 8 people live streaming to Instagram and TikTok. One of Christopher's groomsmen, a hedge fund analyst named Tyler, was the first to break ranks. Dude, your mother-in-law owns your house. That is actually hilarious. Shut up, Tyler. Christopher snarled. No, seriously. This is like a reality show in real time. The broke black mom who is secretly richer than all of us combined. Tyler held up his phone, filming everything. This is going to be everywhere by midnight. That is when I noticed something interesting happening at the other tables. The non-Whitmore guests, the people who were not part of the old money crowd, were starting to smile. A woman at table 7 stood up and started clapping. Then table 4 joined in. Within 45 seconds, about half the reception hall was applauding, the half that was not related to either family and had just watched the ultimate underdog victory. The Whitmore family members looked mortified. Their friends from the country club were frantically texting, probably trying to figure out how quickly they could distance themselves from this social catastrophe. Melissa noticed the applause and completely lost what was left of her composure. Stop clapping. This is not funny. She destroyed my entire family. She turned to me with pure hatred in her eyes. I hope you are happy, Mom. I hope this was worth it. It was Melissa. My voice was still calm, still controlled. Your father made me promise to set boundaries if you ever cross certain lines. Tonight you crossed the biggest one. What line? Using his memory as a weapon against the woman who loved him most. That shut her up completely. Christopher was now on his phone, probably calling lawyers or financial advisors or both. Harrison Whitmore had collapsed back into his chair and was staring at nothing. Victoria Whitmore was still crying into her napkin. The DJ, clearly out of his depth, made the mistake of asking if anyone wanted to request a song. Tyler, the hedge fund groomsman, shouted out, "Play Money Cannot Buy Me Love by the Beatles." Half the room laughed. Melissa screamed again. I decided it was time to leave. I walked toward the exit past tables full of people who were either applauding, filming, or sitting in stunned silence. As I reached the door, Melissa's voice rang out one last time. "Do not you dare walk away from me. We are not done." I turned back and looked at her across the reception hall. My daughter, in her beautiful dress, surrounded by the wreckage of her new family's reputation. "Yes, Melissa, we are." And I walked out into the Pennsylvania night, leaving behind 7 years of silence and 35 years of motherhood. The valet brought me my 2013 Honda Accord. I tipped him $30 and drove home to my small condo. But the real consequences were just beginning. At midnight, my phone started ringing, blocked numbers. Text messages from numbers I did not recognize. By 1 in the morning, the story was trending on Twitter. Wedding reception revenge goes viral. Daughter humiliates broke mother. Discovers she is multimillionaire who owns in-laws estate. 3 Philadelphia news stations had already picked it up. By 2 a.m., I had 17 missed calls from Melissa. I did not answer any of them. At 3:15 a.m., someone knocked on my door. I looked through the peephole. It was Christopher, alone. I opened the door but left the chain lock engaged. "What do you want, Christopher?" "Mrs. Adler, I need to talk to you about the property." "Your property?" "Our house." "That is not a conversation we are having at 3 in the morning. Please, my parents are having a complete breakdown. My mother has taken sleeping pills. My father is drinking himself unconscious." The humiliation. I cut him off. The humiliation of what, Christopher? Of being exposed as frauds who have been living in someone else's house for 14 years while pretending it was your ancestral estate? He flinched. "We did not know you owned it. We thought it was some kind of trust arrangement. You knew exactly what it was. A charity case. My charity keeping your family housed while you pretended to be old money." His face reddened. "What do you want from us?" "I want nothing from you, Christopher." The arrangement continues. $1 per year rent. I pay the taxes and maintenance. Nothing changes. Then why tell everyone? Because your wife used my husband's death to humiliate me publicly, and your family has spent 4 years treating me like I was beneath them. Like I should be grateful my daughter was marrying up. I leaned against the door frame. "You want to know the really funny part, Christopher? I was going to gift you the house as a wedding present. Had the deed transfer papers drawn up and everything." His eyes went wide. "What?" "I was going to announce it tonight. After Melissa's speech, I was going to stand up and say, 'Congratulations, here is a $9 million house as my gift to you both.'" I pulled out my phone and showed him the email from my attorney dated that morning. But then Melissa gave her speech about how her father died ashamed of me, how I was a pathetic failure, how grateful she was to have Harrison as a real father figure. Christopher stared at the email. "Oh my God." So I changed my mind, sent my attorney a different set of instructions, the will revision instead of the deed transfer. He looked like he might be sick. "Mrs. Adler, I did not know she was going to say those things." You stood there and smiled, Christopher. You held her hand. You nodded along when she talked about rising above her circumstances. "I know," he whispered. "I am sorry. Go home, Christopher. Go take care of your parents, and tell Melissa to stop calling me. We have nothing to say to each other, but Mrs. Adler, she is your daughter. Not anymore." I closed the door, heard him standing there for another minute before his footsteps retreated down the hallway. I went to my bedroom and looked at David's photo on my nightstand, the one from our 25th anniversary, 2 years before the cancer. "I did what you asked," I whispered. "I set the boundary. I hope it was the right choice." My phone buzzed. Another blocked number. I turned it off completely and went to bed. The next morning, I woke to 217 missed calls, 63 voicemails, 142 text messages. Most were from reporters. Some were from Melissa. 3 were from my attorney. I called my attorney first. "Joanne, I have been trying to reach you all night." The video from the wedding has 2.6 million views on YouTube. TMZ picked it up. So did the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Post. Even the New York Times is calling. I do not want to talk to any of them. Understood. But we need to discuss the Whitmore situation. Harrison Whitmore's attorney called me at 7 this morning threatening legal action. On what grounds? Emotional distress, public humiliation, breach of the rental agreement. The rental agreement that they signed 14 years ago and have honored without complaint until last night? Exactly. They have no case. Let them try. What about Melissa? Has she contacted you? 63 voicemails I have not listened to. Joanne, as your attorney, I have to ask. Are you certain about the will change? Leaving her only $1? Completely certain. This is what David wanted. What he made me promise. My attorney was quiet for a moment. Then, for what it is worth, I think you did the right thing. Some people need to lose everything before they learn anything. I spent the rest of that day ignoring my phone. By evening, the story had been picked up by cable news. A panel on CNN was debating whether I was a hero or a villain. Half said I was standing up against elder abuse and social humiliation. The other half said public revenge was cruel no matter the provocation. I did not care what they thought. 3 days later, I received a certified letter. It was from Christopher's attorney. Formal notice that Christopher Whitmore was filing for annulment, citing fraud and misrepresentation. Specifically, that Melissa had failed to disclose her mother's true financial status, which constituted material misrepresentation of family circumstances. I called my attorney. Can he do that? Technically, yes. Will it work? Probably. Melissa did misrepresent her background, though I doubt that was her intent. How long will it take? 40 to 60 days if Melissa does not contest it. Will she contest it? My attorney paused. Joanne, your daughter called my office yesterday. She is not contesting the annulment. She said she just wants it over. So Christopher gets a clean exit, and Melissa gets nothing. She gets what she earned. 7 days after the wedding, the annulment was filed. Melissa did not contest, did not fight, just signed the papers and disappeared. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she moved to Seattle, changed her name back to Adler, got a job with a small tech startup that probably did not Google her before hiring. She blocked me on every social media platform, changed her phone number, made it clear she wanted nothing to do with me ever again, and I let her go, because some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt, and some lessons cost more than money. 41 days after the wedding, Christopher's annulment was finalized. The grounds were fraud by material misrepresentation of family financial circumstances. The judge agreed that Melissa's failure to disclose her mother's wealth constituted deception significant enough to void the marriage. Christopher walked away with his dignity barely intact. Melissa walked away with nothing but a viral video that would follow her forever. The Whitmore family became social pariahs overnight. Harrison resigned from 3 country club boards. Victoria stepped down from the charity organizations she had chaired for decades. Their friends from the old money crowd quietly distanced themselves. Nobody wants to associate with people whose entire social status was built on a lie, on living in someone else's house while pretending it was their ancestral estate. I kept the rental arrangement at $1 per year. Not out of kindness, but because watching them live in my house knowing everyone knew the truth was a better punishment than evicting them. Every day they woke up in that 14-bedroom mansion, they had to remember that a black woman they looked down on owned every brick. Every month when they wrote that $1 check, they had to remember their humiliation. The media coverage died down after about 3 weeks, but the social consequences lasted much longer. I received interview requests from everyone: Oprah's producers, The Today Show, Good Morning America. 60 Minutes wanted to do a full segment. I declined all of them. This was not about fame. This was about honoring David's final wishes, about setting boundaries with someone who weaponized his memory. 6 weeks after the wedding, my attorney called. "Joanne, I have the final paperwork for the charitable donation." "Are you absolutely certain about this?" $80,900,000 to the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. "This is irreversible. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. The remaining $100,000 goes to you for living expenses. That is barely enough to live on for a few years." "It is more than enough. I have my military pension. I have Social Security. I do not need $80 million. David and I never needed it." We were happy in our row house shopping at Target. The money was always supposed to help people, not spoil our daughter. 3 months after the wedding, I attended the formal announcement. The Pancreatic Cancer Action Network held a press conference in Philadelphia. They were announcing the largest single donation in their organization's history, $80,900,000 from Joanne Adler, in memory of her husband David Adler, elementary school teacher. Pancreatic cancer survivor for 24 months, who believed that character mattered more than wealth. The foundation director spoke about what the money would fund: clinical trials for new treatments, support programs for families watching someone they love fight an unwinnable battle, research into early detection methods that could save thousands of lives. After the press conference, reporters asked me questions. "Mrs. Adler, do you have any regrets about disinheriting your daughter?" "None whatsoever, but she is your only child." "She was my only child." Past tense. "What about reconciliation? Have you spoken to her since the wedding?" "No, and I do not expect to. She made her choices. I made mine." The reporter pressed further. "Some people say what you did was cruel. That public humiliation was an overreaction." I looked directly at the camera. Those people never heard their spouse's deathbed recording. They never watched their child use their partner's death as a social climbing tool. They never spent 7 years honoring a dying person's wishes only to have those wishes spat on for the entertainment of nearly 200 strangers. "Do you regret how public it was? Could you have handled it privately?" I smiled. "Melissa humiliated me publicly, in front of 195 people, at my own daughter's wedding." She earned a public response. The interview aired that evening on the local news. By the next morning, it had been picked up nationally. The clip of me saying she was my only child past tense went viral, 3.4 million views. People debated it endlessly online. Half said I was a hero standing up to entitled children who abused their parents. The other half said I was a monster who destroyed my daughter over one bad speech. I did not care what strangers thought. I cared what David would have thought. And David's last recorded words told me exactly what he wanted. 4 months after the wedding, the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network sent me an invitation. They were breaking ground on a new research facility in Philadelphia. They wanted to name it after David. Would I attend the ceremony? I drove to the site on a cold February morning. Exactly 7 years after David died, the foundation director met me at the entrance. "Mrs. Adler, we cannot thank you enough. This facility will change lives. Save lives. Your husband's legacy will help thousands of families." This is what he wanted. David always said the best revenge against death was helping others live. We stood together as they unveiled the cornerstone. Carved in granite were the words, "The David Adler Memorial Research Center, dedicated to finding a cure for pancreatic cancer." In memory of a teacher who valued character over wealth and kindness over class. I stood there looking at my husband's name in stone and felt something I had not felt since the wedding. Peace. Not happiness, not satisfaction, just peace. David's death had meaning now. His suffering had purpose. The money that could have spoiled our daughter would instead save strangers. That is what he wanted. That is what I promised him. At the reception after the ceremony, a woman approached me. She was maybe 40 years old with kind eyes. "Mrs. Adler, I wanted to thank you personally. My father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer last year. Your donation funded the clinical trial he is in. He is responding to treatment. The doctors say he might have years instead of months." I felt tears forming for the first time since the wedding. "I am glad, so glad. Your father must be a wonderful man." "He is, and he raised me to never take family for granted, to never value money over people, to never forget where I came from." She paused. "I saw your wedding video. What your daughter said about you, I cannot imagine." "Thank you," I whispered, "for understanding." She squeezed my hand. "Some parents enable their children forever. You loved your daughter enough to let her face consequences. That takes more courage than most people have." After she walked away, I sat alone in a corner of the reception hall. In my purse, I carried David's iPhone, still charged after 7 years, still holding his final message. I opened the voice memos app and scrolled past the recording I played at the wedding. There were others, older ones, from before the cancer, before the cruelty. I found one from Melissa's 10th birthday. David's healthy voice filled my ear. "Joanne? Are you recording? Good." Melissa just blew out her candles. She wished for a puppy, and for Mom and Dad to never die. His laugh. "God, I love that kid. I hope she stays this sweet forever." I closed the app, put the phone away. David's wish did not come true. Melissa did not stay sweet. She became someone who could stand in front of nearly 200 people and use her father's death as a weapon. Someone who valued social status over family. Someone who would rather be accepted by the Whitmores than honor the man who raised her. And now she was gone, living in Seattle under a new name, working for people who did not know her history, starting over in a city where nobody had seen the video, where nobody knew she was the daughter who humiliated her broke mother, only to discover her mother was worth $81 million, where nobody knew her mother gave away nearly everything to cancer research in her father's memory. I drove home that evening as the sun set over Philadelphia. In my small condo, I made tea, sat in my recliner, looked at David's photo on the wall, the one from our anniversary before everything changed. I kept my promise I told him. I set the boundary you asked for. She crossed the line, and I responded exactly how you said I should. 1 year after the wedding, I was sitting in my financial advisor's office signing final paperwork. The charitable donation was complete. $80,900,000 transferred to the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. The remaining $100,000 sat in my checking account, enough to live comfortably with my pension for the rest of my life. "Are you absolutely certain, Mrs. Adler?" my advisor asked for the 100th time. "This leaves you with almost nothing compared to what you had." "I have everything I need. David and I were happy with much less than this. The money was never really mine. It was always meant to help people, not enable someone who did not appreciate it." The news coverage had finally died down completely. The wedding video still had 2.6 million views on YouTube, but people had moved on to the next viral story. The Whitmore family still lived in my house, still paid $1 per year rent, still dealt with the social consequences of their exposure. I saw Victoria Whitmore at the grocery store once. She turned and walked the other way when she saw me, did not make eye contact, did not acknowledge me, just disappeared down another aisle like I was contagious. I did not chase her. There was nothing to say. Harrison Whitmore had aged 10 years in 12 months. I saw his photo in the Philadelphia Business Journal. He looked gray, defeated. The caption said he was stepping down from his last remaining board position. Christopher remarried 8 months after the annulment. A woman from his social circle. Old money. Real old money this time. The wedding announcement in the paper made no mention of his previous marriage. Made no mention of Melissa. It was like she never existed. As for Melissa herself, I heard things through distant acquaintances. She was still in Seattle, still working at the tech startup, still going by Melissa Adler, though she had briefly tried using her middle name Catherine to avoid recognition. Someone who knew someone who worked with her said she was good at her job, kept to herself, never talked about her family, never mentioned having a mother. When coworkers asked about her background, she said she was an only child raised by a single teacher father who died of cancer. She had erased me from her story completely, just as I had erased her from my will. Some people said I went too far. That public humiliation was cruel no matter what Melissa had done. That destroying a family over one night of poor judgment was an overreaction. Those people never heard David's voice recording. They never watched their child weaponize their spouse's death for social approval. They never spent 7 years honoring a dying person's wishes, only to have those wishes violated in the most public way possible. I slept well at night. The Pancreatic Cancer Action Network sent me quarterly reports on how the money was being used, clinical trials for new immunotherapy treatments, support groups for families like mine who watch someone they love fight an impossible battle, research into early detection methods that could change survival rates. Last month, they sent me photos from their latest fundraiser. The banner read, "The David Adler Memorial Research Center, First-Year Anniversary Gala." 200 people attended. Raised another $3 million. David would have loved that. He always said the best revenge against death was helping others live. I kept David's rose gold iPhone charged on my nightstand. Sometimes late at night I played his old voice memos. Not the deathbed recording. The happy ones. The ones where he was laughing with Melissa after parent-teacher conferences. The ones where he was planning her future. The ones from before the cancer changed everything. He never got to see how that future turned out. Maybe that was for the best. Maybe it was better that David died believing Melissa would grow into someone kind, someone who valued character over wealth, someone who would honor his memory instead of using it as a social climbing tool. He died with hope. I lived with the truth, and the truth was that some people never learn. Some people value status over family. Some people will sacrifice anything, including their parents' dignity for acceptance from strangers who do not really care about them. Melissa made her choice at that wedding. I made mine, and neither of us could take it back. 2 years after the wedding, I received an unexpected letter, no return address, postmarked from Seattle. I knew who it was from before I opened it. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Melissa's familiar looping script. "Mom, I do not expect you to read this. I do not expect you to respond, but I need to say some things even if you never acknowledge them. I have spent 2 years in therapy, 2 years trying to understand what happened, why I said those things, why I became someone who could use Dad's death as a weapon. My therapist says I was trying to prove I belonged, that I was worthy of the Whitmore family, that I was embarrassed by my background and overcompensated by destroying you publicly. She says it was cruelty born from insecurity. I know that now, but knowing it does not undo what I did. I watched the video once, only once. I could not finish it, hearing Dad's voice, hearing what he said about me in his final days. Knowing he died disappointed in who I was becoming, that broke something in me that therapy cannot fix. I know you gave away $80 million. I know you did it in Dad's name. I know the David Adler Memorial Research Center exists because you chose pancreatic cancer patients over your own daughter. Part of me hates you for that, but most of me understands it. Dad would have wanted it that way. I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I am not asking for money. I do not deserve that either. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. I understand what I lost, not the inheritance, but you and Dad's respect, and the chance to be the person he believed I could become. I looked at David's name carved in granite at the entrance. 32 years of teaching elementary school, touching young lives with patience and kindness. Then 7 more years touching the world through research he never lived to see. That was the man I married. The man who believed character mattered more than wealth. The man who warned me about our daughter's cruelty and begged me to set boundaries. I kept that promise, even when it cost me everything, even when it meant walking away from my only child, even when it meant spending the rest of my life alone. Because some promises to the dead are more sacred than maintaining peace with the living, I drove home through Philadelphia as autumn turned to winter. In my small condo, I made tea. Sat in my recliner with David's photo beside me, the one from our anniversary before cancer rewrote our story. I opened the drawer and looked at Melissa's letter one more time. My therapist says it was cruelty born from insecurity. Maybe that was true. Maybe Melissa really did understand now. Maybe 2 years of therapy had taught her the lessons that 7 years of my sacrifice could not. But understanding and forgiveness were different things. I could understand why she did it. Understand the insecurity. The desperate need to belong. The willingness to sacrifice her mother's dignity for acceptance from people who never really valued her. Understanding did not mean forgiving, did not mean reconciling, did not mean pretending that wedding speech never happened. I put the letter back in the drawer, closed it. Some doors once shut stay shut. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. Some daughters who weaponize their father's death lose their mothers forever. I looked at David's photo one last time. I kept my promise, I whispered. She crossed the line, and I responded exactly how you asked. The boundary held. The consequence stood. The lesson was taught. Whether Melissa learned, it was no longer my concern. I had done what David asked, honored his wishes, protected his memory, given his death meaning through research that would save lives he never met. That was enough. That had to be enough. Outside my window, Philadelphia sparkled in the winter light. Somewhere in Seattle, my daughter was living a life I was not part of, starting over, building something new, learning lessons the hard way. I wished her well. From a distance. From behind a boundary that would never come down. Because love without consequences was not love. It was enabling. And I loved Melissa enough to let her go. To let her face the cost of her cruelty. To let her build character through loss the way David wanted. Even if it meant losing her forever. Even if it meant spending my remaining years alone. Even if it meant never being called mom again. Some prices are worth paying. Some promises are worth keeping. Some lessons are worth $80 million. David understood that. And now finally, peacefully, I understood it too. Where are you listening from right now? What city? What state? What country? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories reach across the world. Hit that like button if this story made you feel something. Share it if you know someone whose adult children treat them like they are worthless. Someone who sacrificed everything for their kids only to be humiliated in return. Someone who kept quiet about their success to teach values. Subscribe because I have more stories about people who honored promises to the dead, who set boundaries that cost them everything, and who proved that some lessons are worth millions of dollars. Thanks for listening to Joanne's story. Remember that teaching character sometimes means withholding wealth, that love without boundaries is not love, it is enabling. That some promises to the dead are more important than keeping peace with the living. And that the quiet black woman in the corner sitting at table 14 might own everything you are pretending to have. Because the parent you humiliate might be the one funding your entire life. Might own the house your in-laws pretend is theirs. Might have more money than everyone in that room combined. And might love you enough to let you lose everything, rather than enable the cruelty that killed their spouse's spirit in his final days. See you in the next story.